Welcome, listeners of WHFB AM 1060 and WIMS AM 1420, as we launch another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NERPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lisek, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
We're here with AM 1420 WIMS, the talk of the South Shore, online at WIMSradio.com and WHFB AM 1060 online at WHFBradio.com. It's the Green Radio Network, and in a different spin, Carl Lisek, of course, today as we give you an insightful two-part series of some of the great things that are happening not only with the Green Radio Network, but with some excellent folks that are making it happen throughout our state. With us today, it's great to have you back on the program, Shawn Seals, who's the Senior Environmental Manager for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, IDEM. Great to see you, Shawn. How are you?
I'm good, Rick. Thanks for spending some time with me again. It's been a while.
Yes, it actually has been. And I want to keep people and educate them on a lot of the stuff that is going on in and around the area. Tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, Shawn, about IDEM and actually your role there, if you wouldn't mind explaining it to our WIMS and WHFB audience here on the Green Radio Network.
Sure. I am a Senior Environmental Manager at IDEM's Office of Air Quality. I work specifically within our air quality planning section and have multiple responsibilities. They include conducting air quality education and outreach sessions, criteria pollutant planning for 8-hour and fine particles, developing state implementation plans, as well as facilitating all of our transportation conformity issues for IDEM. However, the greatest amount of my time is really spent administering the Dieselwise Indiana program, which provides financial support through cooperative agreements for diesel emission reduction projects across the state.
What's new at IDEM? I hear you have a new commissioner, a lot of things changing. What's new?
Like many, we are also going through some transition at IDEM. Our new commissioner, Bruno Piggott, has been with the agency actually since 2000. Through the years, Bruno has served in a number of different positions. Most recently, he was the chief of staff for former Commissioner Carol Comer. And IDEM is very excited to have Commissioner Piggott's experience with IDEM help guide us moving forward.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and obviously you're delivering the keynote here today. We're here at Blue Chip Casino, obviously inside the Green Room backstage as we're gearing up for an unbelievable event. You're going to be doing the keynote today on the Volkswagen Diesel Emissions Settlement Funds. Can you give us some background, if you wouldn't mind, Shawn, on the settlement itself? A lot of folks want to know the insight to that, please.
Sure. In June of last year, the United States lodged with the court a settlement that partially resolved allegations that Volkswagen violated the Clean Air Act by selling roughly 500,000 vehicles that were equipped with 2-liter diesel engines, and those diesel engines were equipped with what they called defeat devices. And these defeat devices actually allowed the vehicles to operate with a higher than allowable level of NOx emissions. So as it relates to our conversation here today, one of the outcomes of the consent decree is that Volkswagen is required to pay $2.7 billion into a mitigation trust to provide states and tribes the ability to use these funds for diesel emission reduction projects in their areas.
How much money is Indiana set to receive from this Volkswagen settlement? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Of that $2.7 billion from the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust, nearly $39 million will be making its way to Indiana. Now, these funds are made available over a period of no less than 3 years, but the consent decree provides for up to 10 years to spend the funds. So we have 3 to 10 years to spend that $39 million.
Are there some misconceptions about those funds, Shawn? For example, I'm personally finding that many, if not most, believe the funds are only for individual private diesel VW owners. Is that the case?
No, that's not the case. And that actually is one of the things that we have started hearing more and more, and that is that if I didn't own one of these 2-liter diesel vehicles, then there's no benefit to me. And that is actually not the case. A couple other notable misconceptions do come to mind. First, there are some that actually believe the funds can be used for anything that reduces emissions from vehicles, regardless of the type of vehicles. In fact, the Mitigation Trust, which is an appendix, if you will, to the consent decree itself, is very specific about what types of projects are eligible under the program. And they include diesel engine and diesel vehicle replacements in vehicles or equipment such as over-the-road trucks, school buses, transit buses, refuse haulers, locomotives, marine diesel engines, cargo ships, a technology known as shore power that actually allows for ocean-going and lake-going vehicles to plug in as opposed to running those main diesel engines when they're in port. There's also something called the DERA option. And the DERA option the term DERA is probably familiar to some of the listeners and some that have been involved in Dieselwise Indiana activities in the past. DERA stands for the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. It was a act passed by Congress that provides funds through EPA that basically pass out through competitive grants or in some cases state allocations, which is what the state would get just a portion of that just by default. And those allocation grants can be used for a few other types of projects than just those that are identified within the Mitigation Trust. So it does provide a lot more flexibility in the types of projects that we can fund. For example, the Mitigation Trust doesn't provide funding for anything related to idle reduction technologies or aerodynamic technologies, for example. But the DERA component would provide that flexibility. The DERA component, however, if you choose to exercise that through the Mitigation Trust, the DERA component has a higher expectation when it comes to leveraging funds, meaning they're going to have to put a little bit more of their fund into it than the Mitigation Trust itself requires. Now, a second misconception is that these funds are actually available today. I've gotten a few calls asking, how do I apply for the funds? And that's getting a little ahead of the curve, maybe a lot ahead of the curve, honestly. There's a reasonably detailed process contained within the trust that relates to who will administer the funds, how they will be dispersed, and when they will be available. Now, at this point in time, the court is still working to determine a third-party trustee that's going to administer this project and oversee the funds and the disbursement of the Volkswagen money. This will not be EPA that's administering the funds, and it will not be IDEM that's administering the funds directly. After the court selects a trustee and the trust itself is set up, the governor's office then officially identifies who's going to be the beneficiary, who's going to administer it for the state of Indiana as well as the other states. We aren't there yet, but since we have been, since Dieselwise Indiana has done these types of programs over the years, we feel comfortable talking about the Volkswagen Trust and sharing EPA's information.
More questions to come. You're listening to the Green Radio Network. I'm Rick Federighi, of course, Shawn Seals, Senior Environmental Manager for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, IDEM, here with us on AM 1420 WIMS and AM 1060 WHFB. We do this each and every week. This is part one of a two-part series. Michael Sanders is our executive producer here at the Blue Chip Casino today. Question to ask you, how can Hoosiers benefit from the VW settlement? That's kind of one part. And who will be eligible to receive them? I know it's a two-tiered question, but I kind of would love some insight on that, if you wouldn't mind, Shawn.
Sure. The benefit to Hoosiers is actually going to be twofold, so it's good that it's a two-tiered question, right? First, the shared goal of the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust and IDEM's Dieselwise Indiana program will be realized, which is lowering diesel emissions across the state of Indiana. The second benefit, of course, is financial. With such a significant amount of funding coming through the Mitigation Trust, Indiana municipalities and businesses that participate will be able to improve their diesel vehicle fleet at a much lower cost. And in regard to who will specifically be eligible to receive them, the Mitigation Trust provides a lot of flexibility, if you will, as it relates to what types of projects there are pretty specific, as we talked about, vehicle replacements and repowers. The municipal component, there's a municipal component that will be provided up to potentially 100% matches or 100% funding. And private sector will also be available. Funding will also be available to the private sector at a rate of 75%.
I guess I'm going to have to ask this question. I'm going to throw this out here on the Green Radio Network, WIMS, WHFB, Rick Federighi, Shawn Seals. Thank you so much for joining us today. With all the transitions we're seeing right now, Shawn, in the federal government, what are the chances that funding for this program could actually be eliminated? Is there a chance for that?
That is a perfectly reasonable question where we're at today. I understand that question, and we've had some that have asked the same question, so that's not the first time I've heard that, especially even today. Now, although EPA was involved in the investigation, the court case, and the subsequent development of the consent decree and the mitigation trust, they are not implementing this program, nor is any federal agency implementing this program. The court-appointed third-party trustee that I kind of referenced earlier, that's what the process we're in now, is finding that third-party trustee, will actually be responsible for handling everything related to implementing this program. So it won't be an EPA program, it won't be a state program, it won't be a federal program. It's a third-party trustee selected by the court that will administer the program. Therefore, the concerns of whether the funds will or won't be there should not be significant concerns. It is a court case, it's a court filing, it's court mandated.
You're listening to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420, WIMS, AM 1060, WHFB, on the live stream at WIMSradio.com and WHFBradio.com. Why is it important, Shawn, to reduce diesel emissions, particularly right here in northern Indiana?
Sure. Not only here in northern Indiana, but across the state, it's important. And the program was designed to actually offset the higher than allowable NOx emissions that came from these Volkswagen vehicles. That was the goal and the intent of that $2.7 billion. NOx emissions are actually precursors to the formation of ozone and fine particles, we sometimes call PM2.5. Now, these are two national ambient air quality standards that Indiana has actually had some difficulty meeting in previous years. In addition to the emission reduction potential, there's also going to be a clear improved quality of life for the areas where there are highly concentrated diesel emissions, and the reductions through this program can not only improve air quality for those folks, but can also improve the quality of life for those folks.
You're here, of course, today at the South Shore Clean Cities annual meeting and awards representing IDEM, but you're also a South Shore Clean Cities board member. And I think, here's a cool question. Why do you think people should get involved with Clean Cities? It's been around, obviously a packed house, sold out here at Blue Chip Casino this afternoon. Talk about that. Why should people get involved with Clean Cities?
Well, I'm certainly happy to share why I am involved in it and why I think it's important to be involved in it. As we've talked about, I work at IDEM. I administer the Dieselwise Indiana program, and I also sit on the South Shore Board of Directors. I do this for the same reason in all three areas, and that's because I believe it's important to be informed and to be a working part of a solution. I mentioned IDEM's mission earlier in the show, perchance, and I find that South Shore Clean Cities has those same environmental values. Being a member of South Shore Clean Cities actually provides you with the necessary information to make good environmental decisions in both your personal and your work lives.
Finally, what's the best way for folks to learn more about the VW settlement, the funds, the IDEM, all the different things? How can people contact you? So let's focus on, if people want to learn more about the VW settlement funds and IDEM, how can they get a hold of you guys or find out more?
Sure. At this point, since we don't have officially a beneficiary on behalf of the state of Indiana, a really good resource for a lot of information related specifically to the Volkswagen consent decree as well as the mitigation trust is the US EPA website. US EPA actually maintains a website with specific information on the Volkswagen consent decree and mitigation trust. In that case, you can just Google EPA Volkswagen Mitigation Trust, and you'll find it right there. A portion of the presentation that I will be giving today, you'll be able to find that there as well. At this time, probably the best all-around way to learn more about the Mitigation Trust in Dieselwise Indiana is just to contact me directly. I'm always just an email or a phone call away. My information is pretty readily available. As it relates to Dieselwise Indiana, once again, easiest way to probably find us on the web is just Google Dieselwise Indiana, Dieselwise one word, and you'll find my contact information and everything else you need to know there.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, and 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NERPC.
AM 1420 WIMS, AM 1060 WHFB, Green Radio Network host Carl Lisek. I'm Rick Federighi with Girard Media LLC. We are here today at the South Shore Clean Cities annual meeting and awards, and you're listening to the coverage as it continues here on Girard Media. Carl Lisek, our host and our event host for today. How are you?
Rick, I am doing fantastic today.
It is absolutely great to see you here, a packed room. And again, as Shawn Seals from IDEM would say, that Carl Lisek can pack a room.
I don't know about that, but, we're very blessed. Shawn, as Shawn says, we get to work with some great people throughout Northern Indiana, but our entire state. And Shawn, as being one of our state leaders, as you can see, has really helped reduce emissions here in Northern Indiana. And we're just really proud of, some of the accomplishments that Shawn has brought to Northern Indiana and also the state of Indiana.
What I love, Carl, is that you have a plethora of folks here. You've got the stage set for the awards ceremony here at the Blue Chip Stardust Event Center. You obviously have a number of partners and vendors that coincide in the adjacent facility in the room that really explains what we do. You, as the host of the Green Radio Network, what do you want to throw out there? Because you have very interesting guests each and every week right here on WIMS and on WHFB. Explain a little bit about your thought process here today.
Well, again, Rick, I think Indiana is not known for its environmentalism, if you will. I think what we see with the Green Radio Network is the opportunity to highlight some of the great things that are going on, to talk about everything that's green and all the good things that are going on, not only in Northwest Indiana, Northern Indiana, Michigan, but also the entire country. And so, really our dream with the Green Radio Network is to talk about things that we can do as normal citizens, consumers, that can help with our environmental footprint across the nation.
I noticed as we come in through the foyer area here at the Stardust Event Center, you've got a number of different vehicles represented. If you look on Facebook right now on WIMS and on WHFB, you'll actually see pictures of not only the vendors, the event itself, but these actual cars that are here. The center one, I go right to the Michigan City Police Department. We are out nonstop year round, and we see Sergeant Chris Yagelski. Can you explain, Carl? Let's start in the center, and we'll move to the right and to the left and talk about that a little bit here on the Green Radio Network.
So I think one of the things that we've done is, the city of Michigan City has been an environmental leader throughout Indiana and throughout the nation. And obviously with Mayor Muir and, working with the police department and trying to help them go green. So one of the first phases that we worked with the police department, not only in Michigan City, but LaPorte and other areas throughout Northern Indiana, is helping our law enforcement agencies look at ways that they can reduce their carbon footprint. Again, I think if you look at any community, the biggest users of fuel is probably our police department, law enforcement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the vehicles. So, working with the city of Michigan City, we did apply for a grant several years ago and use it to apply for over 35 electric vehicles. And this was like the first phase of electric vehicles in and around Indiana. And the Think car, which was decked out with law enforcement lights, and they use it as a patrol car, but it's also an officer-friendly car. And so we applaud the things that are going on in Michigan City. And that was just one phase. As today, as our event progresses, you're going to see some other things that we're working on with the city and trying to implement other things as electric, zero emission motorcycles. And again, I think one of the cool things that you're going to see throughout Indiana is that we're trying to demo some of these vehicles for law enforcement agencies, emergency responders, to say, hey, we can use some of this new technology and start implementing that. And so part of our goal is South Shore Clean City is to identify some of the vendors that are local, that you can purchase this equipment, and then we also try to help them with funding and putting these things together collectively and then implementing those. So if we can successfully implement a project, we can then also do it somewhere else in a great state. And so the one thing that we've seen not only with the Green Radio Network but with our community leaders is that people are working together. No matter what you hear in the press, right here on WIMS, that we are working together, and your leaders of the state of Indiana are working collectively together to improve the quality of life.
AM 1420 WIMS, AM 1060 WHFB, Carl Lisek and Rick Federighi. Michael Sanders. Sanders, our executive on-site producer, along with Jackie Beisel. Some of the great folks that are obviously here include some of the phenomenal sponsors, and some of the things that you have done include working with great partners like NIPSCO in earlier shows that you have done here on the Green Radio Network. Carl Lisek, of course, here, the host of that show on both radio stations. Talk a little bit about NIPSCO, like, for example, the really cool charging stations. And so that's just one of several.
Yeah, absolutely. NIPSCO actually is one of the first agencies here in Northwest Indiana that originated South Shore Clean Cities back in 1999. So the board of directors consisted of a lot of NIPSCO employees. And then, as we became more stabilized, we took over the leadership of the South Shore Clean Cities program. But we've worked with NIPSCO on numerous programs. We just recently finished the implementation of over 150 public charging stations across northern Indiana, and that also included 250 home charging stations. So we are set really in a lot of ways to start implementing some of these electric vehicles that you see on our show and that are on display today for consumers, and then also for some of the communities that we serve.
What do you think, if you don't mind me talking about this? You were obviously on with WIMS and WHFB as we put a final thought out there. You were just with your representatives with the Green Radio Network, by the way, at the Chicago Auto Show. What do you see out there? Do you see a lot of this stuff being implemented? It's the biggest show in the country, and it's right here in our backyard, and you were there.
We were there. We rolled out a new grant program here for northern Indiana. We worked with 7 other states, and Indiana was a recipient of the state with the American Lung Association out of Minnesota. We announced with the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, American Lung Association, and these 7 other states, the EVOLVE program. And the EVOLVE program really is working throughout our state and our areas on the implementation of electric vehicles, electric charging stations, and then also education and outreach, and looking at ways of implementing. So right-sizing fleets, things like that. So pretty much throughout the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be working with everyone on trying to do demonstrations with electric vehicles, not only from electric cars, electric trucks, electric motorcycles, to show that we can really start implementing some of this technology. The technology is there. The ranges are improving. We're seeing still there's tax incentives for consumers, and then there's grants. And so part of the things that we're implementing and that we announced today was this $39 million project that the state will be implementing with the Volkswagen settlement. And part of that settlement was South Shore Clean Cities did apply for some funding for ZEV funding, which was called Zero Emission Electric Vehicles. And so we had applied for some funding, and we're hoping to be a recipient of that so we can start actually implementing some of these vehicles for free into our communities. And so, and again, it's part of a settlement that VW had to, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that throughout the coming year. And so we're going to be working with our community leaders, our business leaders, and our consumer leaders. And, we want to just be known as that resource to help bring these new and green technologies to our area.
Carl Lisek, host of the Green Radio Network, heard exclusively on Girard Media LLC, AM 1420 WIMS, AM 1060 WHFB. I thank you, Carl, for your time and all you're doing for the good of our communities, not only throughout northern Indiana, but of course throughout the state. Thank you for all the stuff that you do as well on WIMS and WHFB, a great event.
It's always a pleasure, Rick. As you know, our work is never done. And, we just look forward to a great 2017 here for Indiana.
I'm Rick Federighi, our executive producer, Michael Sanders. Have a great day and think green.